All right, all right, all right. It is another Sunday. I am your host, Friday Jones, and thanks to the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, we have another episode of the Black Civics Collective. And, we are in our final week of September, so you all know what that means. It means that we are going into Black August. And for those of you that do not know, the Center for Constitutional Rights has officially defined Black August as a time designated to commemorate and honor the freedom fighters, especially those inside the walls of our prison industrial complex, through their vision and tenacity and their deep love for us, where they really have sacrificed their life along the lines of abolition. Black August is a time for us to really remember those who died, like the Dr. Martin Luther Kings, like Malcolm X, the big names that we know, Medgar Evers. But then we also have modern day advocates we want to lift up and we want to celebrate. And so we are happy that we're at the end of September so we can begin to kick off Black August starting this Friday. So everybody get ready. We'll be trying to do some posting. So if you're not following us, make sure you're following us on social media at NAASD.org on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. We are in all of those places. One of the things that I know that the top of the day, and I'm sure we will get into it with today's guest, is where we are in this administration. It is a wild time in the United States. There's so much that is happening. We've never seen so many executive orders come out so fast. And we know one of the reasons why we do Black Civics is to help folks to understand our political processes. And Black civics is generally defined as the study and science of the privileges and obligations of citizens. And citizenship is about joining in with community and what we do to contribute to society. And as we know, we have three levels of government. We have presidential, we have our Senate, which includes both the Congress and the Senate. We also have the judicial, which we know the Supreme Court is ahead of. But for us, part of the reason why we do this particular show is so that we encourage people to vote. We want you joining political parties, whether it's Democrats or the Republicans is another thing, but we want you politically engaged, helping on campaigns, joining in with civic groups like the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. If you have community groups, NAACP, we don't always agree. But Urban League, there are community groups, there are food banks, there are people that do voter registration drive that are in your own locales. We have some farm conglomerates and networks that people are part of in the rural South. And it's important, even if you're a professional, whether accounting, architecture, lawyer, what have you, to join those Black organizations for professionals. And you can also write a news op-ed piece, particularly in this space of reparations. That is what the show Black Civics is about. We want to engage you, but we also want you to be engaged in community and standing up your citizenship. So with that, I'm so excited for us to be speaking today with Dr. Marquita Gammage. For those of you who do not know, I had the privilege of working with her as the vice chair of Los Angeles's Reparations Commission. Dr. Marquita Gammage is a full professor and chair of the Africana Studies Department at Cal State University at Northridge. So she's at CSUN. A leading Afrocentric scholar and justice researcher. Dr. Gammage is nationally recognized for her work on reparations, racial equity, African-American liberation. She earned her PhD in Africana American Studies from Temple University and her MA in Africana Studies from SUNY Albany and her BA from my very own Howard University, my bison sister. She is in the house. I have to, Dr. Gammage, continue to read. We don't usually read the full bios, but I want to give you all of your flowers. Dr. Gammage served as the research co-lead for the City of Los Angeles's African American Experience and Reparations Study, one of the nation's most significant municipal efforts to investigate the historical harms and structural racism experienced by Black residents and to develop pathways towards reparative justice. She also co-led the CSUN Identity-Based Resource Centers project, advancing research that uplifts the voices and experiences of racially marginalized students in higher education. Dr. Gammage is an editor. Oh, we can't skip this part. Wait, her scholarship centers on the intersection of media, education, family, public policy through an Afrocentric and justice-driven lens. She examines how media representations of Black womanhood and Black families contribute to anti-Black social policy and public perceptions, offering critical analysis that affirm African humanity and dignity. Her work exposes the cultural mechanisms that sustain racial oppressions and actively contribute to movements for reparations action and social transformation. Everyone, we have the wonderful and beautiful Dr. Marquita Gammage here with us. Good morning.
Good morning. So good to see you again. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And so it's crazy. I think all the time we worked together, I did not realize you did your undergrad at Howard University.
Oh, yes. Yes, my favorite alma mater. So
it's always good to be in the presence of a lady bison in particular. Yes. So this is like an extra treat this morning. How did you even fall into like this Afro kind of American studies? What made you like just professionally even want to go that route?
It was actually at Howard University. I had the opportunity of studying political science and philosophy at Howard. And I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana. And so going to Howard really exposed me to the diversity of Black life, Black cultures, Black experiences. And what began to stand out for me was my experiences growing up and how we oftentimes face challenges that were systemic. They were structurally ingrained in the way that the city functioned and the state, the government functioned. And so that ended up leading me to do the McNair Scholars Program because I wanted to research and study this stuff more. And I thought I was going to go on to law school after that. But instead, I fell in love with researching. I wanted to study more about what was happening in my community and communities like mine. And I began to see trends. And that led me to pursue my master's in Africana Studies and ultimately my PhD in Afroecology and African American Studies.
What a journey. New Orleans is hands down one of my favorite cities, and New Orleans has the what do you call those where people are buried? Like what are those things called? The burial sites? Not the museums, but the graveyards.
Graveyards.
Yes. So, you know, some of the oldest graveyards, some really historic Black folks, Black American folks who are buried, you know, it's a lot of just history in New Orleans in and of itself. It's one of my favorite places to visit for that reason. Like the food is culture rich, the music is culture rich, the Black Indian population down there is culture rich, and their artistry, you know, when they are out and in their full regalia. I mean, some of the work that's been done just by those families over the past 100 years is just amazing, amazing work. Since you started talking about the research, let's talk a little bit about this book that you have. This book is when I saw that you had this new book coming out, I wanted to have you on the show. Particularly because the images of Black women, how it informs policy, this new administration that we have. And I think, Dana, can we show the book cover to the audience? So this wonderful book here, Media and Racism and you know, how it's affecting women. This topic to me really hits home. In the early 90s, I had a lot of music director clients. And I would sit in on the meetings with the record labels when they were coming up with these ideas for what these videos should look like. And I feel like the video vixen was created in the 1990s, right? And I was sitting in on a lot of the meetings where that happened. So talk to us a little bit about this book and why this book. Why now?
Yes, thank you. So media racism, the impact of media injustice on Black women's lives, really tried to call to task the function of the media, not just how it has been used, but like its actual creation of promoting and really socializing the public, not just the American public, but really the world, into certain ideologies of racial groups, of gender groups, of sexual groups. But in particular, for my focus on the book, it's how the media has socialized the public into thinking about Black women and Black families. When you talk about the example of the video vixen, for example, that was purposeful design to mirror that of the century-old racial trope of the Jezebel, of Black women being hypersexual, of Black women being sexually promiscuous and available and toxic and dangerous at the same time because of their promiscuity, for example. And so as a result of that, you see the creation of images in the media like the video vixen, which was part of my first study at Howard when I was in the McNair program, is looking at those rap music videos and how it was overwhelmingly perpetuating this negative stereotype of Black women as hypersexual, sex crazed, and out of control, and therefore playing into the public stereotypes of being baby mamas, of being more prone to sexually transmitted diseases, for example, of being welfare queens. And when we look at those messages, right, that are coming through the media, even media produced by us, right, what we end up seeing is that there is matching public policy that may have even started prior to the creation of those images in the media. And so as a result of that, you see harsh public policy that is being advanced. For example, the war on drugs, classifying Black women as crack mamas, right? Delegitimizing their need for public aid in economic crisis, right? Because the country during this time, you saw families economically struggling. We still see that happening now. But during this time frame, they began to criminalize the Black mother as welfare dependent, as addicted to drugs, as unstable and unable to nurture and prepare children to be contributing members to society and to the labor force. So when you think about it in those terms, then those images mirror the public policy messages that then validate the public policy, that then force the public policy to be accepted by the general public, right? And so then you see these harsher restrictions, and then you actually begin to see the criminalization of Black women as a result of these messages that are coming through the media, not because the data actually supports those messages. For example, in the book, I talk about a lot of that statistical data where, for example, we were saying that Black women were crack mamas and Black babies were crack babies. But when in actuality, the data were showing that white women were giving birth to larger amount of children with cocaine in their system than Black women were, as an illustration. And so when we challenge those narratives with the data, it helps us dispel those myths. But when we look at what's happening in the media, we can also begin to unpack and begin to predict future public policy. So in the book, I talk about a 10-year-long period of representations of Black women in the media and say that we can begin to look at what public policies will be coming. And we're seeing those things happen right now. So for example, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is reporting that this is the third month in a row where we see this massive decline of Black women in the workforce. This is not by surprise. It is definitely by design. It's not just a rollback on DEI. It's these decades-long messages of Black women being unstable and toxic in the workplace, being the quote-unquote sapphire, that century-old racial trope, that stereotype that says that Black women cannot be accounted for. They're dangerous. They're self-serving. They use their sexual powers to manipulate white men in the workplace, that they oftentimes are underqualified. So when you look at that sapphire stereotype, you see it constantly, reused in the media, even modern day media, then you begin to see how these policies and these initiatives are making sense on this attack on Black women professionals, because we have seen a decade long of messages of Black women professionals of being toxic for the American work environment.
So what's interesting to me, there's a few different things. One, I'm going to be honest. When I was sitting, so I was in the executive meetings for the development of some of these videos, and then I was also on the back end during the video shoots. I was usually one of the last people on set because I had to pay people for their work for the day. Like, they couldn't be paid in advance; they had to be paid the day of service. And so I'm on set. I'm hearing the conversations. I'm hearing the women talking about the kids they have to go pick up. Johnny has to go, to basketball camp or whatever it was back in the day, like doing very family oriented, normal stuff. But, by day, mom is a dancer on a video shoot. And the other thing that really stood out to me in the executive meetings were, artists had a say, but most of the time it was the record label and the record label executives that had the power. And a lot of times, yes, there would be Black executives in the room. They worked in the A&R departments, but you usually had your white Jewish, executive who had to actually do the green lighting. And it seemed to me at that particular window of time, particularly in the early 90s, that was an opportunity for white men in particular to have access to Black women in a way that they would not have otherwise had. And so some of the imagery, if you will, that was green lighted, it wasn't necessarily because of some appetite that like rappers had or Black artists of the time, R&B artists had, or even Black women artists. It wasn't their whatever taste. It was the taste of the white men at the top. And I was so excited to see your book because often people don't talk about like the layered aspects of it. And unless you saw it, you wouldn't know. How would you know?
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up, because the ownership piece is so vitally important when we talk about media. The majority of media is still primarily owned by white males. And so when you think about that, even the stations where Black shows dominate is not owned and operated by us. And so when you think about why are there is a predominance of images that tell the singular narrative of Black life, Black culture, when we are so diverse, so richly diverse. Our cultures, are the oldest, right? In terms of our civilizations, are the oldest human civilizations. And yet we have contributed to the American fabric, the American culture, in so many ways, but that's oftentimes ripped from us. We don't get that credit. We don't get the contributions that we're actually making. Instead, they take false messages that really reinforce their racist ideas in the first place about Black culture and about Black life, to say that it's those aspects of it makes the Black culture inferior to the white American culture, and that we should therefore shed off our Black identity and become more American. And if we fail to do that, then we're not American, we're anti-American, which is highly problematic. Black Americans are American. Black Americans have contributed significantly to, if not overwhelmingly to, the American cultural fabric, from music to food to politics. Think about the establishment of laws, even the way the Constitution was written. African Americans have had a significant imprint on those decisions that have been made, and you still see that happening to this day. And so I think part of the problem with the current stage of the media is that while we see more Black media ownership, more Black media producers and creatives, we're assuming that therefore we are controlling the narratives completely, and we're not. We still see that they still exist on the margins, especially Black women. Media producers and media execs are still on the margins. And so we have to begin to challenge why those messages are there. Why are those images are there? Do they actually reflect who we are in our real realities, even when we call it reality TV?
Yeah, the timing of this book also couldn't be any more perfect, because under this administration, we had all the cuts to welfare programs. And on TikTok, we're all of a sudden seeing all these white people who really didn't realize how dependent their communities are on these social welfare programs. And so you have the created welfare queen image, right? And so it's the welfare queens that benefit from the public policy. But in reality, it is, to your point, it's also largely, white women who are delivering babies addicted to cocaine. It is white women who are on welfare and they're getting the support for SNAP and for food. There are whole communities that are receiving government grants that are supported by the USDA, and they don't even know what the USDA is to know that their food program is a federal grant program. And so honestly, this media racism, the impact of media injustice on Black women's lives, the timing of it, in my opinion, could not be any more perfect, as like it's a kiss from God that you were working on this and that it was completed like in this time under this administration. The timing is perfect.
Thank you. It really was timely. I didn't necessarily anticipate this reality, but it has spoken to and helped me personally digest a lot of things that are happening, like the political othering of Black political candidates, like former Vice President Harris, for example. That political othering was used primarily in the media to ostracize her and make her seem non-American, unacceptable, too different, right? Her ethnic heritage, too different. Her family dynamic, too different. Her motherhood, too different, right? So that political othering to be the representative of the nation as an illustration. And so that the media was used to reinforce this idea of she's way too different to represent us. She's way too different. She's not ideologically aligned with the white American values. That was ultimately the political othering that you saw. And so
I don't think any of us are aligned with white political values. I mean, just on GP, that to me seems to be a statement that's kind of applicable to anyone. I mean, that, Jesse Jackson, it's almost like we're either too much or not enough. And somehow Barack Obama managed to be just right. But, he was not pro reparations. And I think for a lot of us, we miss that. We are pragmatic voters anyway. And so we have, as a people, lived through enough of dominant culture and dominant society laws, some of the laws that you're talking about, some of the policy that you're talking about in your book, that a lot of us don't even believe in the idea of reparations. And we can talk about the reparations work on the other side after our commercial break in about 5 more minutes. But yeah, that political othering through the census, we as a people have been othered, and some of the work that I talk about, we've had periods of being African American in the early 17 and early 1800s. We went through a period of being Negro. We went through a period of being colored. We went through a period of being Black. And then somehow we wound up back to this African American concept. But that whole thing through a census lens has always been a complete othering. And when you read our designation, it's basically anyone from sub-Saharan groups in Africa, which is just a broad stroke, right? It's just a broad stroke. Meanwhile, there are, I think, 3,000 different ethnicities or languages within continental Africa, that even that broad stroke is othering and limiting in terms of perception of who Black folks are, just in terms of a spectrum and a diaspora. So
100% agree. You stated it perfectly. I would like to, before we conclude this section, is highlight how Black women media creators and producers are really not accepting the faulty narratives that are being perpetuated about us. Instead, they are taking their opportunities to create ownership and space for new creatives to be able to create messages and images that are more germane to our cultural heritage, to who we are, that really preserves and affirms our humanity, because a lot of this stuff in the media does not. It denigrates our humanity and lessens the value of our culture. And so you see individuals like Issa Rae or Ava DuVernay, for example, putting out, Meryl Brockerkill, putting out these images that show the multi-dimensional and multifaceted realities that we experience in the different range of emotions. And so that's a really good, that's the last chapter in the book, where we really talk about the power of Black women creatives in the media, even highlighting Beyonce, and many folks are talking about her Cowboy Carter tour, and how she really is putting a much needed boot on the neck of American racism and anti-Blackness, and how she's reclaiming America as Black America from the American flag, which was originally sewn by Black girls, for example, to denim and what we call jeans, right? And how that was originally considered Negro cloth and was considered something inferior. Now it has been commercialized and and promoted as a American fabric, as an illustration. And so when you think about these things, she's trying to reclaim Black Western culture, Black country culture as American culture, as American country music, as American country style. And so that's really empowering to see, because like I said, I'm from Louisiana. Black country folks have been here all along, but it's oftentimes that those communities and those experiences are ignored, isolated, and marginalized, such that country music is considered a white American craft. And it's not. And so, Black women, media producers and creatives and creative artists really are taking a stage right now to put forward more diverse and dynamic and really beautiful, affirming representations of Black women, Black families, and Black humanity.
Yeah. The funny thing here in California, there's a Black cowboy culture. And so many of the people came from Louisiana, came from Texas. So they brought that culture here with them. There's a whole Black cowboy rodeo that happens here every year. And it's so interesting, the comments, particularly around Beyonce and that flag. But people forget, we have been, as a people, in every war since we fought for our independence against the British. We have been in the Civil War. We have been in all of America's wars. We have veterans, that are highly decorated with Purple Hearts. We have saved the day with our, the Red Tails, who were second class, airmen, but they got the job done. There's story after story after story about that. And so our patriotism, is ours. It's our patriotism. And we do take pride in this country, even when this country politically doesn't give us the full citizenship in ways that we deserve. And that's such a misnomer. I'm glad that you spoke about that. There are also, and I don't remember these white actresses' names, but I know one was from like Grey's Anatomy, who fought for wages, on that show with Black cast. Another one is someone whose name starts with an H. She worked on a Black production with a female Black director, and she talked about how there was so much more diversity on set than all the white productions, that she had acted in previously. And it was so eye-opening for her to see the level of inclusivity we bring to the table when we are the directors and the producers in the film industry. So I'm really glad that you have that piece of research in your book. And one last time, Dana, if we could just show Dr. Gammage's book before we go to commercial break. I want to encourage people to go ahead and look for Dr. Gammage's book, Media Racism, and ultimately the impact that it's having on Black women's lives. You can get it wherever books are sold in these here United States. So you don't, some of us protest some of the sellers, but wherever it is that you get your books from, this is a book you definitely should have in your library. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more with Dr. Gammage on her reparations work with the city of Los Angeles. Again, follow us on social media, NAASD.org, and make sure you're liking the video. We'll be right back.
Welcome. We are the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. Our mission is to advance the national movement for reparations. The United States Office of Management and Budget set 5 minimum standards for collecting racial data. The Black race is defined as a person having origin in any of the Black racial categories of Africa. NAASD has recommended that the OMB disaggregate data to accomplish 3 goals: decouple race from ethnicity, create an ethnic term that exclusively identifies descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, and create an ethnic term that preserves the American freedmen political status. The ethnogenesis of the African American identity is a result of ethnocide. The identity is from a people with shared history. Race identity plus ethnic identity equals peoplehood. Together, we can fix this dilemma with the OMB. We can build a coalition, grow the movement, and create a unified demand. What can you do to get involved? You can join NAASD today at www.naasd.org. You can email the OMB using our toolkit, or you can donate to NAASD so that we can continue this work. Thank you for your time, and stay connected with us on social media at NAASDORG. We are on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. You can also sign up for our newsletter at www.naasd.org.
All right. And while we are at it, we are here for those of you that might just be joining us with the wonderful Dr. Marquita Gammage. She was the lead researcher. She says co-lead, but you are the person I saw. She was the lead researcher with Cal State Northridge, City of Los Angeles Reparations Advisory Commission. That report for me, I sat with that report when it was done, the final report. You know, we had the interim reports from Mockingbird and from CSUN. And then, of course, the final work has everything put together in larger scale detail. And I think I was a little angry. And for those of you, I think we have a picture of the report, and we'll drop a link on where you can read this report. It's on the City of LA's website. But I was angry. I'm just being honest. I was, as we do this work and as an advocate in the reparations space, it is in a way at times thankless work. And the level of research that you and your team brought together, talk about the different departments at CSUN that actually worked on the final report.
Yes, so thank you so much again. We had a team of 6 primary researchers coming from 3 of us from Africana Studies at CSUN. It's a historic department celebrating over 55 years, our 56th year this November. We also had members from Criminology and Justice Studies, from Geography, and from our Geospatial Center as well. And we really got to give a shout out to the College of Social and Behavioral Science, where all of us came from, because our college dean was really in support of this. And we had a number of different faculty contributing. So it was definitely a collective effort, and we could not have done this without Black Angelenos in the commission really stepping up and pouring out, and also the Civil plus Human Rights Division really out with their outreach and supporting of these efforts, and promoting the study and the community's participation. But major kudos to the community for being directly invested in this research, for showing up to the public forums and and the workshops, for coming to every presentation, for seeing us at the booths at Taste of Soul, for example. The community really have demonstrated their investment in this restorative justice approach.
Yeah, the public definitely showed up. We're thanking people. I really want to thank CAM. I think CAM hosted our first public interface, and they hosted our final public interface. We did a public interface at the Skirball Museum. We also had, oh my gosh, I forget the council member, but we had a public session, and that was one of our most productive public sessions in South LA. I think it was Curran Price, maybe in his district, that gave, his local office space up, and that we received a lot of input from the public. And we also were over at the Rodeo Center, that new complex there on Obama Drive, where we had a public interface, and people showed up and they showed out, which, lets me know that this is something that Angelenos want. We also, if you could talk a little bit about some of the lived experiences people shared, because I think that research was also very compelling.
Yes. So running thread throughout the 12 areas of harms that we studied was that a culture of anti-Blackness, anti-Black violence, anti-Black discrimination has really had lingering and compounding consequences in the lives of Black Angelenos. Stories of the constant fear for children's, parents having this fear for their children's lives by simply going to school. A lot of families have to bus their children to different communities or have them commute to different communities in order to receive quality education because of the racial segregation that the schools had been sanctioned to operate as. So when they had the opportunity to bus their children and send them to different areas, there was this constant fear. There was these significant experiences of their children being pulled over and harassed simply by attempting to go to school and earn an education. And so that was a common one. The police violence. I mean, the data shows it in the police records alone, and we do a great job of detecting that. But when you hear the stories, when you listen to the community members share, in the interviews and the focus groups, share their experiences with racial violence, and the racial violence, including the terrorism of being harassed, of being followed, of being stopped. Those things are consequential in the lives of individuals. And then for this case, Black Angelenos, not only does it aid in this legitimate fear, but it also has health consequences when folks are under that constant level of stress, as an illustration. But another thing is the environment and health injustices was another area where just the overexposure to lead, to poor quality air, to poor quality water, for example, and the building structures being having increased risk for childhood asthma and health-related issues. This families telling stories of how they have suffered in this way. And one of the most consequential areas that has led to wealth gaps, generational wealth gaps, has been in the housing area, and how African Americans were denied access to housing in certain locations or racially restrictive covenants, for example, preventing them from being able to live in certain area. Pacoima being one of the only areas that they could live in the San Fernando Valley, for example, having these Black zones, and then undervaluing the homes in those areas so that they were assessed at a lower rate, then given these subprime lending practices, higher interest rates, higher penalties on being late, for example. All of these things contributed to folks not being able to transfer their homes to the next generation. And that generational wealth gap grows when you're not able to maintain that level of generational home ownership. Nationally and in LA, that is a significant way to build wealth through your home. Owning that for generation after generation can be impactful. And so when you look at that, having Black land, seas like Bruce's Beach, for example, having Black communities, overly policed, all of those things kind of point to this culture of anti-Blackness, this systemic and state-sanctioned racism. And what I mean by state-sanctioned is that it was legal. These things were legal But also, even when they stopped being legal, thanks to the Civil Rights Act, right? But when they stopped being legal, they were still allowed, right? And the police helped reinforce them in the same way that we see today, with the gentrification of Black communities and Black people being policed for being in their communities, for being in their homes, for being on their jobs, for being in the parks in their communities and being harassed. The police is reinforcing that anti-Black culture of anti-Blackness, and you don't belong here. And we want you out of these spaces. So many are facing housing insecurity as a result of this, homelessness as a result of this, are forced to leave the city boundaries altogether. And so I think when we look at the experiences of Black Angelenos, it's experiences both of racial discrimination and racial violence, but it's also a story of resilience, the beauty and strength of that resistance and that cultural pride. We also got to capture that. And we don't talk enough about that when we're talking about reparations research, is how the communities have tried to fight to maintain their identity, their community space, their cultural practices, and try to still, even despite massive state sanctioned and city sanctioned attacks on their very humanity, Black folks in Los Angeles still say, we are here. We want to thrive. We want to exist. We want to pass on something important to our children and their children and the next generations. And so they try to continue to fight. And that's why I think the community showed up. They see value in who they are and the cultures and communities that they have built. And that's why they showed up to participate in this study. They want to preserve that history and that legacy. And that's a beautiful thing that we got to witness as well.
So I want to say, for me, the public testimonies were powerful. I think I first moved here in 94, and then I became a permanent resident in 97. And reading the report, for me, there are two main things that stuck out. One, there are multi-governing bodies, governmental bodies, that actually shared in the harm with people in Los Angeles. That's the federal government, through their COINTELPRO program, obviously through some of the housing laws that were legal, leans into federal space. With the county, there were the DAs that were really over policing, over prosecuting Black families. And that's including what, as we enter Black August, right, and we start talking about some of our Black leaders, the Black Panthers were born in the state of California. And there were Black Panthers here in the city of Los Angeles, but there was very targeted effort against members of the Black Panther Party. We know the Bunch Center at UCLA. We know how Mr. Bunch, was literally killed, right? So it's intergovernmental, it's LAPD, it's the city of LA, with you're talking about building of structures and permitting of structures that led to the lead poisoning. So it's really intergovernmental. And then the overwhelming part, even we started with the founding of the existing charter that the city runs under in 1925. But one of the founding charter council members was a member of the KKK, as were about 3,000, different employees in different capacities within the city of Los Angeles were active KKK members. And so when you just think about 100 years, like, to me, because this is 2025 and our look back period was to 1925, although some of the research includes like the coming of California state into the Union and what LA looked like prior to that. But LAPD legitimately has had a 100-year reign of terror. And because I'm caring for my 96-year-old grandmother, I put it into the perspective of an entire life.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
there's a trigger warning for a reason, because it's triggering.
Yes, absolutely. We have an entire section, a chapter on racial terror, and we talk about the sundown towns to the widespread Ku Klux Klan chapters throughout the city and the county. Chapter members dispersed across the greater Los Angeles area. And we saw that Black Angelenos had to navigate a city with fear and caution, right? Like you mentioned, for a lifetime. right? And for generations, we saw white supremacist terrorism evoke fear in Black residents and embolden white residents to back anti-Black efforts to maintain segregation and to prevent Blacks from marrying and having children with white members of the community, right? So the city's refusal to criminalize anti-Black racial terrorists, right, while at the same time upholding racially discriminatory laws, only strengthened the impact of racial terror because the city made it legal and acceptable. Even when it wasn't legal, it was acceptable by the failure to prosecute and the failure to criminalize those actions. And so as a result of that, you see lifelong racial terror and fear disrupting the basic human rights and safety, the right to rest and peace, and just peace of mind, while at the same time denying them equitable access to pursue what is termed the American dream, right? Especially in terms of denied and hindered access to home ownership. And instead, when Black folks moved into areas where they could own homes, they could afford to own homes, for example, they were terrorized, right? In those communities. And what we call like these neighborhood associations, they were protected by the police. They were oftentimes, police members were part of these things as well, right? And so they were protected, they were allowed to. And so it's just, like I mentioned earlier, it's this, in the same way you see this authorization of this anti-Black racial violence that's oftentimes not talked about when we talk about the experiences of Black Angelenos in the city of Los Angeles. We fail to talk about that ongoing racial terror that still exists to this day.
And thank you for saying it just like that. The recommendations that have gone to the Department of Civil and Human Rights, which is the department under which this particular commission was housed, has not been published or finalized as of yet. But I can talk about some of the recommendations, which included having the city actually stand up some sort of sanctuary language that holds up the civil rights. These are federal laws that already exist, but to hold up the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the Civil Rights Acts of 1870 and 1871, collectively known as enforcement acts, because those particular groupings of laws actually offer protections that were not being upheld within the state of California from those time periods, I want to say to date. And I think it's important for them to add language either to the charter, to update the charter, or to have some sort of ordinance or resolution that sort of stands over the city where we say we are going to enforce these things. We are going to make anti-Black crimes, because we know the hate crimes against us are number one. And so we're going to put protections in the same way that we have, let's say, for the AAPI community and for some other communities, because it's almost like it's an unwritten rule that we can't focus on Black people. And it drives me insane because, and one of the reasons people get upset, like, why do we have these commissions? Part of it is to document, because once you document the harm, you can say you've got to fix the harm. And then you have the 14th Amendment. You're able to stand up on the 14th Amendment to say, no, these remedies are here. They are race-based. They are, for us being American freedmen, they're specific to this group of people because we have documented the harms. And that's an important piece that people don't often understand. And we are down with you. Unfortunately, I feel like we're just getting into the meat of this. We might have to have you back at another time, maybe you and some of the other commissioners on to just do an LA show. But in your final words, one, I want you to give people ways to stay in touch with you. I know you have some social media handles, but from this research that was done, what would be your biggest hope for the city? Because I talked to the mayor. She claims it's no money. That's not good enough for me. I'm just saying that was 2 nights ago. So anyway, what is your biggest hope for this body of work that you really gave your life energy to for reparations in the city of Los Angeles?
Folks didn't realize, but I actually was carrying my daughter during this process and gave birth to her the last year, the end of March. And it was something that I knew, even though I was with child, even though, we had to go out and survey and everything, I was so emotionally and spiritually and physically invested. I still felt like she came out with that same level of investment, right? Which, if you could see her personality, but I was so invested. And I think the team was so invested in making sure we really got the story correct, got the data correct, and made sure that we were emphasizing the narratives of the lived experiences of Black Angelenos. And we were also trying to be intentional with our recommendations. So for instance, folks may question, well, why are you saying reinforce and uphold these these existing civil rights policies and these existing policies that protect? And today we can understand why. Because there are governmental factors in place and political agendas where we're rolling back as a nation federally on all of these policies and initiatives and acts, civil rights legislation, right, and human rights legislation. And so it was important for us to say, listen, while it is here today, there are attempts to have it gone tomorrow. And so it was important that we asked the city to consider upholding those legislation in order to continue layers of protection. But also, one of the things that I think was a great takeaway is the community's investment in knowing that reparations is about restorative justice. It's an attempt for reconciliation, an attempt to make communities whole. And that is not done in one check or one policy. It is, we talked about in the report, that's why it's almost 400 pages, right? And that doesn't begin to scratch the deep embedded surface of the lived experiences, right? But when we think about it, we see that there are so many layers to these experiences that we have to have restorative justice taking place on multiple dimensions. And it's not just for the city of Los Angeles. Some of the findings are beyond their jurisdiction, right? It's the county, it's the state, it's the nation, as an illustration. And so when we think about that it's not going to be one check. It's about representation. It's about protection. It's about compensation, absolutely, for the harms done. It's about investment as well in the infrastructure of Black communities and to correct historic wrongs and repair underdevelopment in Black communities. And it's about assistance and support in higher education and quality jobs and career development and home ownership and business ownership. All of those things are a part of this. This is going to take time and have to take place in multiple phases in order for us to truly take in effect reparative efforts. And the reason why there is Mockingbird was a part of the fund partner was they were able to analyze different fund models to see how we can begin to do this work in terms of the compensate and the rebuild, the invest and protection models, right? So they're looking at different models of how it's maybe different sources of funding, whether that's philanthropic, whether that is tax-based, whether that is state-based funding. There are multiple models. And for this case, we may need to use all of those models to begin to repair the harms and find ways to a meaningful reconciliation. But it has to begin because we have to stop the compounding racial violence, racial discrimination, and racial terror against Black Angelenos.
Okay, it looks like we have questions, and so we got about 2 minutes to get these questions in. This one looks like it is from Michael Pan, and he is asking, during the commission hearings, did the committee address cash payments and anti-hate crime bills for Black Californians of U.S. chattel slavery? I can say in terms of the recommendations, yes, there were 3 beneficiary classes that were recommended to the city. Yes, it included anti-Black hate, not crime specific, but anti-Black remedies that are tied to some of these federal protections that we have. So yes, that was addressed. And so Dr. Gammage, if you could address the first part about cash payments.
Yes, absolutely. I think compensation was a running thread we heard from the community. It was a leading model for reparative justice, not just nationally, because we saw this has happened nationally where cash payments and compensation has been given to other harmed communities, but internationally as well. This is a really beneficial model. But when we talk about the need to compensate for the injustices and harms experienced by Black Angelenos as a result of ongoing systemic injustices enacted by the cities, residents and private agencies, we have no other choice but to consider cash payments, in my opinion, because we talk about harms in terms of the decreased value of home ownership, harms in terms of, like we didn't get to talk about the employment and underemployment and lack of promotion in city jobs like the LAPD and LAFD, for example, where there's a primary ways to secure stable income and economic growth. As another illustration, we talk about the health harms, right? We still see health harms on the news all the time. The environmental harms, there has to be compensation in those areas to address those, and there are existing models that can teach us how we can begin to do that.
Okay, and then Lil Boss has a question about the book. And mind you, Dr. Gammage's book was about her research with women specifically, but his question is, but what about Black men? If Black women are being attacked through anti-DEI policies, does that mean Black men never benefited from DEI?
Well, I probably would take the second part of the question first. I don't know that we're arguing that Black women benefited from DEI. I think there's a false perception that Black women have overwhelmingly benefited, when in reality, white women have overwhelmingly benefited. White Americans overwhelmingly benefit from DEI policies. And that, remember, DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. That includes gender, sexual orientation, religion. And so the Black community has not been the primary benefactors of DEI policies. Let's just put that on the table. And absolutely, Black men continue to be impacted. I only gave the statistics in relation to the Bureau of Justice Statistics in relation to Black women in the last 3 months, because they have the highest growing unemployment rate. And absolutely, the research does, my research is a Black family-centered research. And so while it focuses on messages about Black women, I also talk about what also are the lingering and underlying messages about Black men, Black masculinity and Black manhood, as well as Black children. And so when you think about these messages about, there's almost this erasure of Black men. Right? There's this criminalizing of Black men and shows Black men in as these violent criminals, incarcerated prisoners, right? And there's a void of dominant images of Black men in the workforce, right? Because the stereotype of Black men wasn't the sapphire like the Black woman in the workforce. The stereotype was that Black men were lazy and did not want to work. And so you don't see the media putting forth racist messages of Black men dominating industries, right? Primarily because the message is that Black men are lazy and don't work, not because that's the reality. We see across the nation and across multiple industries, Black men working and Black men thriving in their industries, and Black men making innovations and advancement in industries. Part of the challenge is that when you attack the Black woman, what we oftentimes underestimate this is when you attack the Black woman, you by product attack the Black family. That includes the Black male, Black elderly, Black children, the Black community. And so hence the focus is on this particular book is on Black women.
All right. And give your social media, because I got to get us off of here in 1.5 minutes. So let people know how to stay in touch with you.
Yes, you can find me. I'm Etsy Son, I'm Professor Etsy Son, but also you can find me on Instagram with Marquita_Gammage.
Dr. Gammage, this has been a really robust conversation. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen. Thank you so much for being here with us at the Black Civics Collective. We will definitely have you back to talk a little bit more with some commissioners about the City of LA reparations efforts once they finalize the actual recommendations to the mayor. We'll see you, I guess, soon, next time. And yes, for everybody who is still with us, please know that EGP Gun Club, we have Mississippi Brewing. If we could pull up their flyer, they are doing their Power Summit. I will not be in attendance this year because I'm doing some work with Assembly Member Nikki Lucas in New York. But at the same time, the same weekend, September 19th through September 21st in Holly Springs, Mississippi, we will be having, or EGP will be hosting and having their annual Build the Power Summit. They have some really exciting things. If you have any questions, you can call 405-361-4751 with your questions, or you can go to their website, www.blackliberationmovement.com, to get more information on the summit. This has been another episode of the Black Civics Collective. We will see you on the other side of Black August next month. Make sure you tap in.